Do you know what is scarier than a bad marriage? A fine marriage. A marriage where nobody's cheating, nobody's threatening to leave. Just two people living under the same roof, eating at the same table, sleeping in the same bed, and feeling absolutely nothing. No tension, no passion, no real conversations, just logistics. Have you paid the light bill? What are we eating tonight? Did you remind the kids about tomorrow? That's it. That's the whole relationship. And the most dangerous part? Most couples in this place don't even know they're there. Because nothing is wrong, exactly. But nothing is really right either. You're not fighting for your marriage because it doesn't feel like there's anything to fight for. You're just coping with it, like a car you don't love anymore, but you still need to get to work. That's autopilot marriage. And I need you to understand something before we go any further. Autopilot doesn't mean your marriage is over. It means your marriage is asleep. And if you don't wake it up deliberately, intentionally, very soon, the silence will do the work that an affair never had to. So stay with me. Because what I'm about to share could be the conversation that saves your marriage, not from a dramatic crisis, but from the quiet, comfortable drift that nobody warned you about. Let me define this properly. Because autopilot marriage is one of those things that's everywhere, but people don't give it a name. Autopilot marriage is what happens when two people shift from being partners to being co-managers. You're no longer building something together. You're just running operations, managing the house, managing the kids, managing appearances. You function well as a unit, but you've stopped connecting as a couple. And here's what makes it so insidious. It doesn't happen because of a big betrayal. There's no dramatic moment you can point to and say, that's where we lost each other. It happens in the in-between. It happens when date nights slowly become optional and then quietly disappear. It happens when deep conversations get replaced by surface-level updates. It happens when you stop asking, how are you really doing? And start assuming you already know. It happens when physical intimacy becomes a transaction instead of a connection. Or worse, when it stops happening at all and neither of you brings it up anymore. One small withdrawal, then another, then another. And one day you look up and realize you're living parallel lives inside the same marriage. Now I want to address something directly. Some of you watching this are going to say, but we're just in a season. Life is busy, the kids are young, work is intense. This is just where we are right now. I hear you, I do, but I need you to be honest with yourself about the difference between a busy season and a pattern you've normalized. A busy season has an end date. You're aware of it. You're both still emotionally present, still checking in, still protecting the us even when life is loud. A pattern you've normalized that has no end date because you stopped noticing it. You stopped noticing that you haven't laughed, really laughed together in months. You stopped noticing that when something good happens at work, your spouse is no longer the first person you want to tell. You stopped noticing that you've started feeling more like roommates than lovers, more like business partners than best friends. And this is where I want to be very clear about something. Autopilot marriage is not a character flaw. It is not a sign that you married the wrong person, and it is not proof that love is gone. It is a sign that your marriage has been running on memory instead of intention. See, in the beginning, everything was intentional. You tried. You planned. You pursued. You engaged with your whole chest because you wanted to win this person, keep this person, be with this person. But somewhere after the wedding, after the first child, or the second, or the mortgage, or the career shift, the trying quietly stopped. Not because you gave up, but because you assumed the foundation would hold itself. And that's the myth nobody corrects before you say, I do. Marriage doesn't maintain itself. Love doesn't sustain itself. Intimacy doesn't protect itself. Every single one of those things requires two awake, intentional, engaged people choosing each other, not once at the altar, but every single day after it. When that daily choice becomes unconscious, you don't suddenly have a bad marriage. You have an autopilot one. And the difference between the two matters, because one feels urgent and the other feels comfortable. And comfortable is exactly why people stay asleep the longest. So how do you know if this is you? That's what I will be sharing today. 5 signs that your marriage has quietly shifted into autopilot and how to wake up your marriage. I want you to watch this with your heart open, not your defenses up. Because recognizing where you are is the first act of love you can give your marriage. Sign number 1. Your conversations never go below the surface. Think about the last 5 conversations you had with your spouse. What were they about? If you're honest, really honest, most of them probably sounded something like this. The car needs servicing. Your mother called. We need to talk to Tolu's teacher. Don't forget we have that thing on Saturday. Logistics, schedules, tasks, reminders. Now ask yourself, when last did you have a conversation that had nothing to do with the house, the children, or the calendar? When last did you talk about your dreams, your fears, something that's been quietly sitting on your heart? When last did your spouse say something that made you think, I didn't know that about you? In a healthy, intentional marriage, couples are constantly discovering each other because people are always evolving. Your spouse today is not the same person you married 5 years ago, and neither are you. But on autopilot, you stop being curious about each other. You think you already know everything there is to know. So you stop asking. And when you stop asking, you stop seeing each other. And a spouse who feels unseen doesn't feel loved, no matter how many bills you pay or meals you cook. Sign number 2. Physical intimacy has become rare, routine, or completely absent. Now I'm going to say something that might be uncomfortable. Sex in marriage is not just physical. It is one of the primary ways a husband and wife say to each other, I still choose you. I still see you. You are still mine and I am still yours. When that stops, or when it becomes so mechanical and predictable that it feels like just another item on the to-do list, something important is being communicated. Not necessarily that love is gone, but that intentionality is gone. On autopilot, couples stop initiating, because initiating requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires emotional safety, and emotional safety requires connection, and connection requires time and attention that autopilot couples have quietly stopped investing. So instead, you both just wait, and the waiting becomes weeks, and the weeks become months, and nobody says anything because bringing it up feels awkward or confrontational, or like opening a door you're not sure you're ready to walk through, and the silence around it grows louder than the issue itself. If this is you, I need you to hear this clearly. The absence of intimacy in your marriage is not a small thing to manage around. It is a signal, and signals are meant to be responded to, not ignored. Sign number 3. You've stopped growing together. When last did you and your spouse do something together? A book you read together? A goal you're building toward as a unit? A dream you're still daring to chase together? On autopilot, couples stop being each other's adventure. Life becomes a loop, same routine, same roles, same weekends, same conversations. And slowly, the marriage starts to feel less like a journey and more like a waiting room. Here's what's happening underneath that. Growth creates energy. Newness creates curiosity. Shared experiences create memories. And memories are the connective tissue of a long marriage. When you stop creating new memories, you start living entirely off old ones. And old memories, no matter how beautiful, cannot carry the full weight of a present-day marriage. One of the most powerful questions you can ask your spouse right now is this. Is there something you've been wanting to try or experience that we've never made time for? That one question can crack open a version of your spouse you didn't know was still waiting to be discovered. Sign number 4. You're emotionally available to everyone except each other. This one is subtle, but it's devastating. You laugh with your friends. You're present with your colleagues. You're patient with strangers. You're warm with your children. But by the time you get to your spouse, you're empty. You're distracted. You're half present. You're physically in the room, but mentally somewhere else entirely. And your spouse notices. They may not say it. In fact, on autopilot, they've probably stopped saying it because they've said it before and nothing changed. So now they've just adjusted. They've lowered their expectations of you emotionally. They've learned to need less from you because asking for more felt like too much work. And that quiet adjustment, that is one of the most heartbreaking things that can happen in a marriage. Because when your spouse stops asking you for emotional presence, they haven't stopped needing it. They've just stopped believing you're capable of giving it. Your marriage should be the relationship that gets your best, not your leftovers. The moment your spouse becomes the person you show up for last, you have a serious problem that no amount of anniversary dinners can fix. Sign number 5. You've stopped being intentional about the future together. Do you and your spouse still talk about the future? Not just we need to plan for retirement, or we should think about the children's school fees. I mean, do you still dream together? Do you still sit down and say, where do we want to be in 5 years? What kind of marriage do we want to build? What do we want our home to feel like? What experiences do we want to have before we're old? Autopilot couples live almost entirely in the present tense of problems and logistics. They've quietly stopped architecting a future that excites them. And when there's nothing ahead of you to move toward together, you start drifting in separate directions, toward separate visions, separate ambitions, separate versions of life. And one day the distance between those two directions becomes too wide to bridge. A marriage without a shared vision is a marriage without a compass. And a marriage without a compass will always drift, not toward disaster necessarily, but toward irrelevance. Toward two people who are technically together, but functionally alone. So there they are. 5 signs. And if you recognized yourself in 2 or more of those, I don't want you to feel ashamed. I want you to feel awake. Because awareness is not the problem. Awareness is the beginning of the solution. All right, we've named it. We've diagnosed it. Now what do we do about it? I want to be very clear before we go into these steps. This is not a list of quick fixes. Marriage is not a microwave. You don't punch in 2 minutes and pull out something hot and ready. What I'm giving you are 5 intentional shifts, practices, postures, ways of showing up that, if you commit to them consistently, will begin to thaw what has been frozen and rebuild what has been quietly eroding. But they only work if both of you decide, together, that the marriage you have right now is not the marriage you're willing to settle for. So let's go. Step 1. Have the honest conversation. The one you've been avoiding. Everything starts here. Not with a date night, not with a trip, not with a grand romantic gesture, with truth. Sit down with your spouse, not in the middle of a busy evening, not between school runs and work calls, but in a real, protected, intentional moment of quiet, and say something like this: I love you. And I feel like somewhere along the way, we stopped really showing up for each other. I don't want to keep going like this. I want us back. That's it. That's the door. It doesn't need to be a perfect speech. It doesn't need to cover everything at once. It just needs to be honest. Because honesty, spoken with love, is the most disarming force in any marriage. Now, some of you are already thinking, what if they don't receive it well? What if it starts a fight? What if they don't feel the same way? And my answer to that is this: the risk of a hard conversation is far smaller than the cost of permanent silence. A fight can be resolved. Distance, if left long enough, becomes permanent. You owe your marriage the truth. Start there. Step 2. Rebuild the ritual of intentional time. I want you to think of intentional time not as a luxury, but as infrastructure. The same way your home needs electricity and running water to function, your marriage needs regular, protected, distraction-free time together to stay alive. And I'm not talking about time in the same room while you're both on your phones. I'm not talking about watching television side by side in comfortable silence. I'm talking about time where the sole agenda is each other. It could be a weekly date night, even if it's simple. A 30-minute walk after dinner with no phones. A Saturday morning over devotion before the children wake up. A standing monthly evening where you go somewhere, anywhere. and just be together without the weight of roles and responsibilities. The activity matters far less than the consistency. Because what consistency communicates to your spouse is this: you are not an afterthought. You are a scheduled priority. And I will protect this time because I protect what I value. Start with one. Put it in the calendar. Treat it with the same seriousness you treat a business meeting or a doctor's appointment. Because your marriage is the most important appointment you will ever keep. Step 3. Reintroduce curiosity. This is one of the most powerful tools for reconnection, and it costs nothing. Ask better questions. Not "how was your day?" Because that question has a one-word exit, and both of you know it. But questions like, what's something you're looking forward to this month? What's something about our marriage that you're grateful for right now? If you could change one thing about how we spend our time together, what would it be? These questions do something remarkable. They signal to your spouse, I am still curious about you. I'm still interested in who you're becoming. And that signal, that simple, humble, curious signal, is one of the most intimate things one human being can offer another. Here's a practical challenge I want to give you. For the next 30 days, ask your spouse one meaningful question every day. Not a logistics question, a person question, a soul question. And then this is the critical part. Listen, fully, without your phone, without planning your response while they're still talking, without steering the conversation back to yourself. Just listen. You will be amazed at what you learn about someone you've been sleeping next to for years. Step 4. Reawaken physical and emotional intimacy deliberately. I want to address both dimensions here because they are more connected than most people realize. Emotional intimacy and physical intimacy are not two separate conversations in marriage. They are two expressions of the same need to be fully known and fully wanted by the person you chose. When emotional intimacy is low, physical intimacy suffers. And when physical intimacy is absent, emotional intimacy starts to die. They feed each other in both directions. So reawakening intimacy means attending to both at the same time. Emotionally, start with non-sexual physical affection. Hold hands when you're walking or talking. Hug each other at the door. Not a polite 2-second hug, but a real one. Touch your spouse's shoulder when you pass them in the kitchen. Sit close when you're sitting together. These small physical gestures rebuild the language of warmth between two people who have been living in emotional distance. Physically, have the conversation about intimacy directly. Not accusingly, not with a list of complaints, but with honesty and tenderness. I miss being close to you. I want us to find our way back to each other in that way. What do you need from me to feel safe enough for that? That question alone, asked with genuine care, can begin to dismantle walls that have been building for years. And if there are deeper wounds underneath the physical distance, past hurts, unmet needs, experiences that damage trust, do not try to shortcut your way around them. Seek counsel. See a therapist. See a marriage coach. There is no shame in getting help. The only shame is in watching your marriage slowly die and deciding that pride is more important than healing. Step 5. Create a shared vision and chase it together. This is the step that transforms a recovering marriage into a thriving one. Because reconnection is not just about repairing the past. It's about building a future that both of you are genuinely excited to move toward together. Sit down with your spouse and ask this question. What does our dream marriage look like in 5 years? What does our home feel like? What experiences do we want to have? What do we want to build together? What kind of legacy do we want to leave? And then listen. Dream out loud together. Write it down. Make it real. Because here is what shared vision does for a marriage. It gives you a we that is bigger than the daily grind. It gives you something to work toward that belongs to both of you. It reminds you that you are not just two people managing a life. You are two people on a mission together. And couples on a mission together don't drift apart. They have too much to build, too much at stake, too much ahead of them to sleepwalk through what they have right now. Vision creates urgency. And urgency is the antidote to autopilot. So there are your 5 steps. Have the honest conversation. Rebuild the ritual of intentional time. Reintroduce curiosity. Reawaken intimacy. Create a shared vision and chase it together. Now I want to close with this. Every long marriage has seasons of distance. Every great love story has chapters that felt more like survival than romance. What separates the marriages that make it, beautifully and meaningfully, from the ones that quietly expire is not compatibility. It is not luck. It is not even love in the feeling sense of the word. It is a decision. A daily, deliberate, sometimes inconvenient decision to choose your spouse, to show up, to stay awake, to refuse to let comfort become a substitute for connection. Your marriage is not too far gone. It is not too quiet to hear. It is not too cold to be warmed again. But it will not wake itself up. That's your job. And the fact that you watched this all the way to the end tells me you already know that. So go home or look up from your phone right now and see your spouse and choose them again. If this spoke to you, share it with someone whose marriage needs to hear it. Subscribe for more conversations that go beneath the surface, because your relationship deserves more than advice. It deserves truth. I will so see you in the next one.